Love is the most dangerous emotion because it disguises itself so beautifully. It doesn't arrive with warning signs or flashing lights. It doesn't ask for permission. It seeps in, soft, gentle, seductive. It wraps itself around the heart slowly, until it feels less like a feeling and more like a necessity. And by the time the realization hits that the person being loved is all wrong, the heart has already written its vows. Love has a way of convincing the mind to look away, to ignore the red flags, to silence the instincts that whisper, this isn't right. There is something uniquely cruel about falling for the wrong person, not because love was misplaced, but because it was pure, real, and whole, just pointed in the wrong direction. It is easy to judge the heart for loving what it shouldn't, easy to mock it for its missteps, to accuse it of blindness or weakness. But the truth is, the heart doesn't fall in love based on logic. It doesn't analyze character resumes or vet intentions. It moves through feeling, intuition, connection, and sometimes that connection is built on longing, not compatibility. Sometimes it's built on wounds that mirror each other, not values that align. The wrong person rarely looks wrong at the start. They may come into a life during a moment of vulnerability, in a season of emptiness, or at the peak of happiness. They may arrive with charm, attention, passion, all the things the heart has been starving for. And so, the heart opens. It welcomes. It trusts. But eventually, love that's misplaced begins to cost more than it gives. It begins to pull instead of push, to drain instead of inspire. It starts to make a person question their worth. Not because they are unworthy, but because they are trying to hold on to something that keeps slipping through their fingers. The wrong person will never say they are wrong. They may even believe they're right. They may show up inconsistently, love conditionally, and still claim it's real. That's what makes it dangerous. Because it doesn't always come with cruelty or abuse. Sometimes the wrong person simply lacks the capacity to love in the way the heart deserves. And capacity matters. But here lies the harsh truth. Recognizing the wrong person doesn't make the love any less real. That's what makes letting go so hard. The feelings don't vanish just because the facts become clear. The emotional bond doesn't break just because the logic says it must. And so begins the war, the heart versus the truth, the longing versus the reality. It's a brutal conflict, this war within. One part says stay, wait, hope. Another says run, heal, begin again. There's guilt, there's grief. There's a hollow space where dreams once lived. But the longer the heart stays tangled in something that wasn't built to last, the more it begins to lose pieces of itself. And yet, there is power in this pain. Not because suffering is noble, but because survival becomes strength. Because every time the heart is broken open, it has a chance to rebuild with greater clarity. The wrong person can be the catalyst for the deepest kind of self-awareness. They can teach what boundaries mean, what peace feels like, and what real love must look like moving forward. So, yes, love is dangerous. Not because it's bad, but because it's powerful. And when it falls into the wrong hands, it has the ability to disguise dysfunction as destiny. It makes people hold on when they should walk away. It makes silence seem romantic. It makes chaos feel passionate. And worst of all, it makes a person betray their own needs for the sake of keeping something that was never meant to stay. But in the wreckage of misplaced love, something extraordinary can be found. There's a moment, quiet, steady, unmistakable, when the heart starts to wake up. When it realizes that love shouldn't feel like begging. It shouldn't feel like proving. It shouldn't feel like shrinking. It should feel like home. And the wrong person, no matter how much they were once adored, will never offer that kind of shelter. They will only ever be a lesson, a reminder, a mirror. And when that truth is finally accepted, not just intellectually, but deeply, emotionally, it becomes the start of a different kind of love story. One that no longer begs the wrong person to stay, but instead empowers the heart to walk away. Clarity is the first step toward healing, but clarity cannot coexist with illusion. The heart, when wrapped in longing, can craft an entire world out of fragments, a world where red flags look like misunderstandings, where emotional distance feels like mystery, and where inconsistency is mistaken for complexity. But the truth, stripped of romance, is simple. It doesn't need to be explained away. It doesn't ask for excuses. It just stands there, quiet and unshakable. The challenge lies in seeing it, because truth rarely shouts. It doesn't storm in and declare itself. It whispers. It reveals itself in patterns, not promises. It surfaces not in what someone says, but in what they do, consistently, quietly, over time. And too often, the heart wants to see what it wants to believe. It clings to potential, to memories, to a version of the person that once brought joy or comfort. But potential is a gamble, and memories are not proof of a present reality. Just because someone was good to you once doesn't mean they are good for you now. It's easy to overlook the truth when the heart is full. When love is strong, the flaws seem softer. The emotional neglect feels forgivable. The broken communication feels like something that just needs time. But time doesn't fix people who don't choose to grow. Love doesn't transform someone who doesn't believe they need to change. To recognize the truth without romance is to look at the relationship through unfiltered eyes. Ask, how do they show up when it matters? Are words followed by action? Is there emotional safety or just moments of relief between storms of uncertainty? Is love consistent, or is it a cycle of highs and lows that leave the soul tired and restless? The wrong person often shows glimpses of the right qualities, just enough to keep hope alive, never enough to build anything solid. They may offer affection without commitment, attention without respect, presence without partnership. And when questioned, they often deflect. You're too emotional. You're overthinking. You expect too much. Slowly, the story turns. You begin to question your standards instead of their behavior. But love isn't meant to create confusion. Real love brings clarity. It creates a foundation, not just of affection, but of trust, respect, honesty. It doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much when you're asking for consistency, for effort, for mutual care. The most painful part of waking up from false love is not just realizing who they are. It's realizing how deeply you wanted to believe in something that wasn't real. It's grieving the idea of what could have been and facing what actually is. But truth, no matter how harsh, is never the enemy. Denial is. It takes strength to sit with the truth without trying to dress it up in hope. It takes courage to stop romanticizing someone's potential and start acknowledging their reality. It takes wisdom to understand that love, when it's right, doesn't feel like a puzzle you can't solve. It feels like clarity. So ask the hard questions. Strip the story of emotion for just a moment and look at what remains. If the connection is built on waiting, guessing, hurting, and hoping, what exactly is being protected, the person or the illusion of them? The heart deserves more than a love that survives only in good moments. It deserves more than fleeting connection or temporary validation. It deserves to rest in truth, not wrestle with confusion. Recognizing that someone is wrong for you does not mean you failed. It means you are waking up. It means you are beginning to honor what is real, because the truth, when finally faced, doesn't destroy. It frees. The heart doesn't heal by suppression. It heals by feeling. It heals by facing every ache, every tear, every tremor of grief that follows the loss of someone it once held dear, even if that person was never truly right. Pain demands presence, not avoidance. There's a tendency to rush through heartbreak, to numb it with distractions, to cover it with false strength, to pretend that the feelings don't matter just because the person was wrong. But love, even when misplaced, leaves its mark. And pretending not to care only deepens the wound. So allow it. Allow the sadness. Allow the sting of disappointment, the weight of betrayal, the hollowness of unmet hopes. Let the feelings come like a storm. Let them pour through without resistance. Because every suppressed emotion becomes stored grief. Grief that will find its way back later, disguised as bitterness, anxiety, or self-doubt. Feeling doesn't mean falling. It doesn't mean becoming undone forever. It means honoring what the heart experienced without shame. It means holding space for the tenderness inside while still moving forward. There is a difference between processing pain and being consumed by it. And it's important to remember, pain doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It's not a sign of failure to miss someone who hurt you. It's not a flaw to wish things had been different. It's not foolish to mourn the dream you had with someone who could never meet you there. Grief is not proof of weakness, it is proof of capacity. You hurt deeply because you love deeply, but there is a line between feeling your emotions and letting them dictate your worth. The goal isn't to stop the heart from aching. The goal is to stop tying that ache to your identity. You are not your sadness. You are not your loss. You are not the rejection, nor the unreturned love. You are the one experiencing the pain, not the pain itself. So feel it, but don't sink into it. Cry, but don't crumble. Acknowledge the ache, but don't surrender your power to it. Let your emotions pass through like waves, strong, overwhelming, but temporary. You are the shore. The waves will crash, but you will remain. Healing doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for honesty. Honesty with yourself about how much it hurts, and patience with yourself about how long it might take. Some days will feel heavy, others will feel free. Progress won't always be linear, but it will happen if you keep showing up. There's no need to harden your heart to survive this. Becoming cold isn't healing, it's hiding. Building walls isn't strength, it's fear. The goal isn't to feel less, it's to feel with wisdom. To let love in again someday, but on new terms, on better terms, with better eyes and a stronger sense of self. Pain is not permanent, and this chapter, no matter how deeply it cuts, is not the end of your story. It is a reminder that you can love without losing yourself, that you can be wounded without being broken, that you can feel everything fully and still rise entirely. So give yourself permission to feel, to mourn, to be vulnerable. That's how the heart learns to breathe again. That's how it begins to heal, not by shutting down, but by staying open. Open enough to feel and strong enough not to fall apart. There's a subtle yet dangerous confusion that can trap even the strongest hearts, the belief that attachment equals love. But not all bonds are built from affection. Some are forged in fear, insecurity, and emotional hunger. Some are born not from what is nurturing, but from what is familiar. Attachment grows quickly when someone fills a void, when they enter a life at a moment of vulnerability and offer comfort, attention, or distraction. It's easy to mistake this relief for connection, easy to believe that just because someone makes the loneliness disappear, they must be meant to stay. But attachment has more to do with need than nourishment. It clings tightly, afraid of loss, terrified of absence. Love, in contrast, does not grip. It flows. It does not beg to be held. It stands firmly on mutual care, not emotional dependency. Affection says, I care about you because of who you are. Attachment says, I need you because I don't know who I am without you. And that's the difference. When love is real, it expands the soul. It makes room for individuality, space for growth, freedom for truth. It does not demand sacrifice of identity or suppression of needs. Love does not require the shrinking of self to make someone else stay. But attachment does. Attachment pleads. It rationalizes mistreatment. It twists itself into smaller and smaller shapes, just to remain in the orbit of someone who may never truly see or value what is being offered. And the longer that bond is held, the more it starts to feel like love, even when it's simply survival. This is how the wrong person becomes so hard to let go of. Not because they gave lasting joy, but because they became entwined with a need, a fear of abandonment, a desire to feel chosen, no matter the cost. And when that person begins to withdraw, the panic sets in, not just about losing them, but about losing the sense of identity that was built around them. To break that cycle is to reclaim power. It means asking, is this love or is it fear? Do I feel cherished or do I just feel less alone? Am I held or am I just temporarily distracted from emptiness? Letting go of attachment is not heartlessness, it is healing. It is the decision to no longer confuse intensity with intimacy, chaos with passion, or obsession with devotion. Because real love doesn't leave a person constantly anxious. It doesn't make one question their worth or their place in someone's life. And perhaps the most painful truth is this: just because someone is hard to forget doesn't mean they were right. Some connections are magnetic for all the wrong reasons. Trauma bonds can feel like soulmates. Familiar dysfunction can feel like comfort. But it isn't. It's just repetition. And repetition is not love. It's programming. The heart was never made to be caged in dependency. It was made to connect freely, fully, and without fear. So when love becomes a lifeline, when it feels more like clinging than caring, step back, breathe, ask what you're really holding on to, because attachment begs. Affection listens, attachment traps, affection trusts. One is rooted in scarcity, the other in abundance. One says, don't leave me or I'll fall apart. The other says, I choose you and I still choose myself. Breaking attachment may feel like tearing away a piece of the soul, but it is actually the first act of returning to it. The beginning of relearning what love is supposed to feel like. Not desperate, not draining, but secure, reciprocal, and real. The mind becomes its own battlefield when love turns into speculation. It begins constructing alternative endings, rewriting history, and obsessing over scenarios that never existed. What if they change? What if I had done more? What if this time is different? These questions echo endlessly, each one feeding a fantasy that only prolongs pain. The what if is a trap. It's not a path forward. It's a loop that keeps the heart stuck in yesterday, wishing today looked different. It keeps you invested in a story that isn't being written anymore. Or worse, in one that was never real to begin with. These thoughts are seductive because they offer hope. And hope, when tied to the wrong person, becomes dangerous. Not because hope is bad, but because it asks you to ignore the evidence. It invites you to wait in emotional limbo. It convinces you to gamble with your peace. The what if does not reflect reality. It reflects longing. It's the voice of the heart struggling to reconcile what it feels with what it knows. It's the part of you that still wishes to be proven wrong, still craves a miracle, still waits for someone who made a habit of letting you down to suddenly choose differently. But hope is not healing, and potential is not a promise. People show you who they are every day in how they speak, how they show up, how they prioritize your presence. If their actions have consistently told you they can't love you the way you need, then that is the answer. No hypothetical version of them, no fantasy change, no imaginary moment of clarity will rewrite that truth. The danger of what if is that it erases boundaries. It encourages you to stay open to someone who has already closed their hands. It leads you to justify mistreatment, to excuse inconsistency, to rewrite disappointment as destiny. You begin to carry the weight of their growth as if it's your responsibility. You wait for them to change, to evolve, to realize your worth. But that realization must come from within them, not from your pain, your loyalty, or your sacrifice. Healing begins the moment the what if is silenced. When the heart stops bargaining with a past that cannot be changed. When the energy once spent on imagining a different version of them is redirected toward becoming a stronger version of yourself. There is peace in acceptance, not because the truth is always pleasant, but because it sets you free from delusion. When the questions stop, clarity begins. And in that clarity, you start to see how much life has been delayed, how many dreams have been dimmed, how much self-worth has been chipped away by trying to make someone stay who was never ready to love you fully. The future cannot bloom in the soil of fantasy. It needs truth. It needs present awareness. It needs the willingness to say what is meant for me will never have to be imagined into existence. Real love doesn't come with a question mark. It comes with consistency, with clarity, with commitment that doesn't need to be begged for. So silence the what if. Stop writing a story that was never yours to finish. What happened was enough to tell you everything you need to know. The signs were clear, the lessons were loud, and now the next chapter waits. Written not in fantasy, but in freedom. The greatest loss in loving the wrong person isn't just the relationship. It's the quiet, gradual abandonment of self. Somewhere in the effort to make it work, to hold on, to fix what was broken, parts of the self begin to disappear. Boundaries get blurred, needs get silenced. Identity becomes entangled with being chosen, being enough, being seen. But once the fog lifts, once the heart stops chasing a love that never felt steady, there comes an opportunity, rare and sacred, to come home to yourself. This is where healing truly begins, not in forgetting them, but in remembering you, who you were before the compromise, who you were before you started questioning your worth, before you believed love had to be earned through effort, sacrifice, or staying silent when you should have spoken up. Rebuilding the relationship with yourself is not just about recovery, it's about rediscovery. It's about asking, what do I want when I'm not trying to be wanted? Who am I when I'm not trying to be enough for someone else? The answers might feel unfamiliar at first, but they are yours. And they are the foundation for everything that comes next. This is the season of relearning. Relearning how to trust your voice after it was ignored. Relearning how to hear your instincts after they were doubted. Relearning how to feel joy without guilt, strength without apology, and solitude without shame. Self-relationship is not self-obsession. It's self-respect. It's deciding that your needs are not inconveniences. Your dreams are not distractions. Your voice is not too loud. Your emotions are not too much. You begin to treat yourself with the kindness you kept offering to someone else. You start showing up for yourself the way you once wished they would. You learn to speak love into your own heart on the lonely days, the healing days, the rebuilding days, and slowly things shift. Confidence grows not from external validation, but from inner alignment. Peace returns not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer need someone else to complete what was never missing to begin with. Because here's the truth, you were never too much. You were never hard to love. You were just trying to find safety in someone who didn't know how to hold it. And now that you've let go, you get to be the one who holds space for your healing. You get to create a life where your worth isn't a question, where your heart is honored, not handled. This work is not easy. It requires facing the parts of yourself that were neglected. It means forgiving yourself for staying too long. It means replacing harsh inner criticism with compassion. But it's worth it. because the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. And when that relationship is strong, the next time love arrives, it will not be from desperation. It will be from overflow. It will not be chosen out of fear of loneliness, but from the clarity of knowing your value. You won't settle for being seen partially when you've learned to see yourself fully. So start here. Start with your own name. Say it with gentleness, with reverence. Start with the mirror. Meet your own gaze, not with judgment, but with respect. Start with your own heart. Promise it that it will never again be sacrificed for someone who cannot hold its depth. Rebuilding the relationship with yourself is not a step. It's the journey, and it is the one that leads to everything else worth having. Letting go is not a feeling, it's a decision, one that must be made with clarity, not chaos. Because if emotion alone guided detachment, we'd stay stuck forever. Longing would keep us tethered. Nostalgia would paint old wounds in golden light. Hope would whisper lies that feel like truth. And we would call this love, when it's really a refusal to release. Detachment is not born from hatred or anger. It doesn't require bitterness. It requires discipline, a commitment to what you know even when it goes against what you feel. Because feelings are fleeting, they swell and fade. But knowledge, real, lived truth, is steady. You don't detach because you no longer care. You detach because you finally do, about yourself. Detachment is not coldness. It's not indifference. It's not pretending they never mattered. It's choosing not to bleed for someone who wouldn't stop the wound. It's walking away, not because your love wasn't real, but because your peace is more important than proving your worth to someone who couldn't see it. And this choice must be made again and again, especially in the early days. When your mind reaches back to them like muscle memory, when a song, a scent, or a silence reminds you of them, the pull will come. And in those moments, the heart will want to reopen the door. But discipline speaks. It says you've seen enough. It says you don't need to go back to confirm the pain was real. It says you can miss someone and still not let them return. Because missing someone is not a reason to keep them. Missing is just part of the process. It's not a sign you made a mistake. It's simply a sign you cared. And that care, when redirected, becomes the foundation for your healing. Detachment doesn't mean deleting every memory. It means removing the power those memories have to control your present. It means looking back without being pulled under. It means remembering without relapsing, respecting what was, while refusing to keep suffering for it. And detachment requires boundaries, not just with them, but with yourself. You can't heal while still feeding the fantasy, while checking in on them, while rereading old messages, while replaying old conversations in search of new meaning. Every time you entertain their ghost, you invite back the version of yourself that begged to be seen. So when the urge comes to reach out, to reattach, to rationalize, pause, breathe. Remind yourself of the truth you learned in the silence, of the self you found in the absence. Remind yourself that healing is not about winning them back. It's about winning yourself back. You owe yourself the discipline to break the cycle, not because it's easy, but because staying would cost more than leaving ever will. Because detachment is the act of saying, I will no longer betray myself for love that could not hold me. Letting go is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the strength to rise above your own longing, to see love clearly, not just intensely. To know when the chapter is over, even if the heart still trembles at the turning of the page. One of the heaviest weights to carry isn't just the pain of being hurt by someone. It's the guilt of knowing you stayed too long, that you saw the signs, that your intuition whispered, maybe even screamed, and still you held on, believed, tried, hoped, again and again. But healing is not helped by self-punishment. Growth is not accelerated by shame. And the truth is, if you could have let go sooner, you would have. You stayed because your heart was genuine, because you saw something redeemable, because you believed in potential, because you thought love was supposed to be hard sometimes. You stayed because you hoped they'd change, because the connection felt rare, because walking away from someone you loved felt like betrayal, even when they had already betrayed your trust, your peace, or your worth. This does not make you foolish. This makes you human, compassionate, loyal to a fault perhaps, but that's not something to hate yourself for. That's something to understand, to examine, to grow from, not to carry like a chain around your neck. Forgiveness begins with telling yourself, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. You weren't weak, you were learning, you weren't blind, you were hoping, you weren't broken, you were open-hearted, and there is no shame in that. The truth is, many people stay too long, not because they lack courage, but because they were never taught the difference between endurance and self-abandonment. Because they thought that holding on was the noble thing, that loving someone unconditionally meant loving them even when it cost their own sanity. But real growth is realizing that self-sacrifice isn't love. that staying too long isn't loyalty, it's loss. And part of reclaiming yourself is forgiving the part of you that didn't yet know how to walk away. Because hindsight is cruel when it weaponizes clarity. Of course now you see the truth. Of course now you wish you had left at the first red flag, the first lie, the first time your soul whispered that you were shrinking. But you didn't. And that doesn't make you broken. It makes you brave enough to hope, brave enough to believe. And now, brave enough to face the truth and let go. Self-forgiveness doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means refusing to carry the pain as punishment. It means looking at your reflection and saying, I honor the part of me that loved deeply, and I release the part that keeps trying to rewrite the past. It means closing the door not just on them, but on your guilt. Because guilt will keep you in the cycle long after they're gone. You are not defined by how long you stayed. You are defined by your decision to finally leave, to finally choose yourself, to finally learn that loving someone else should never come at the cost of your own soul. So speak gently to your past. Bless it for what it taught you. Thank it for the wisdom it gave. And then let it rest. Because your healing doesn't need a villain, and your heart doesn't need another trial. It needs compassion. It needs permission to move forward without dragging the weight of self-blame behind it. To truly heal, the definition of love must change. Not the idealized, romanticized versions sold by stories and songs, but a deeper, truer understanding of what love actually is and what it is not. Because for many, the wrong person feels right not because of who they are, but because of what love was once taught to be. If love was first experienced as chaos, inconsistency, or pain masked as care, then that becomes the template. And so, when the heart meets someone who mirrors those patterns, it doesn't run, it remembers. It calls it home. But love is not confusion. It is not anxiety disguised as excitement. It is not emotional highs followed by hollow silence. It is not proving your worth. It is not suffering in hope of being chosen. That's not love. That's survival. And survival is not the standard anymore. Real love is calm. It is consistent. It is a safe place, not a battlefield. It builds rather than tests. It speaks truth, not riddles. It grows in clarity, not confusion. Real love listens. It sees. It honors boundaries. It respects silence. It doesn't require explanation after explanation just to be understood. It doesn't ask for your soul as payment for affection. And most importantly, real love meets you where you are, without needing you to become smaller, quieter, less emotional, less intense, or less you. So the work now becomes this: unlearning what was mistaken for love, rewriting the narrative that says pain is proof of passion, redefining love not as an escape from yourself, but a return to it. Not as something you chase, but something that aligns. Not as a fix, but as a reflection of the wholeness you've reclaimed. You are not here to be half-loved. You are not here to beg for the bare minimum. You are not here to convince someone that your needs are valid. You are not here to spend years healing from a love that only ever left you empty. You are here to experience love that mirrors your growth. Love that adds to your peace, not steals from it. Love that feels like rest, not resistance. That doesn't just say you're enough, but treats you like you are. And that kind of love begins when you believe you're worthy of it. When the old version of love is finally released, space is created for something new, for something healing, for something that doesn't feel like a fight, but like coming home to a place you didn't have to earn. Because the moment you stop accepting less, the moment you redefine love, is the moment your entire life starts to shift. This is where the story begins again, not with them, not with the past, not with the ache, but with choice. The choice to rise, the choice to reclaim, the choice to stop romanticizing pain and start honoring peace. Healing is not a single moment. It's not a switch you flip and suddenly the hurt disappears. It is a commitment, a daily decision to no longer live in the shadow of what almost was. There will be days when memories feel louder than logic, when your heart wants to return to what it already knows was wrong, when the silence after goodbye sounds unbearable. And it's in those moments, the most fragile ones, that you must remember, healing is not the absence of missing them. It is the presence of choosing yourself anyway. Choose your healing over your history. Choose your peace over their potential. Choose your wholeness over being half-loved. Not just once, but every morning you wake up tempted to text them. Every night you dream of what could have been. Every time your heart begins to rewrite the pain as poetry. You are not broken because you loved the wrong person. You are not foolish because you stayed too long. You are not weak because you miss them. You are human. And the most powerful thing a human can do is decide they are no longer available for what harms them, no matter how much they once wanted it. So take your pain and build from it. Take your silence and fill it with truth. Take your loneliness and turn it into presence. Learn to love the sound of your own voice again. Learn to trust the ground beneath your feet. Learn to be the one who saves you. You do not need closure from them. You do not need one last conversation. You do not need to understand why they couldn't love you right. What you need is already within you, the courage to stop waiting for something outside of you to heal the ache inside of you. This is your turning point. Let go, not because they didn't matter, but because you finally do. Start again, not because you failed, but because you outgrew the pain. Choose yourself, not as a backup plan, but as the only plan. Because healing isn't about who hurt you. It's about who you become when you finally decide they no longer can. So choose every day, choose your healing, and do it without apology.